M. Night Shyamalan is one of the most interesting directors of the last 25 years, primarily because he's made some fantastic films that are some of my personal favorites. And then just a few years after that, he made some absolute disasters.
What? No!
But whether his movies are awesome or awful or just insane misfires, they're worth talking about. So today I'm gonna stop and rank all 14 M. Night Shyamalan films from the worst to the best. If you're stopping by for the first time, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Let me know your ranking of all 14 M. Night Shyamalan films. My list isn't the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours. Also, over the next couple of months, I'm going to be doing a bunch of travel. In just a couple weeks, I'm going to be at Fan Expo Portland, as well as at an event in LA. Then in March, I'm going to be at Fan Expo Cleveland, actually with Austin Burke and John Flickinger, and then at MegaCon in Orlando at the very end of March and beginning of April. With that said, let's get started. Tied for last place, Lady in the Water. Now, he's made some boring movies, he's made some movies with bad ideas, he's made some movies that have interesting concepts, but he fails to properly deliver on them. Here, he decides to add to the mix being pretentious and self-indulgent. Now, I can accept the fact that he wanted to make a movie where the archetypes of storytelling are real. That's kind of an interesting concept, and maybe he didn't fully pull it off for me. But where this movie absolutely loses me is that he cast himself as the most important author of all time.
Will become leader of this country and begin a movement of great change. Your book will be the seeds of many of his great thoughts.
And then he makes a film critic an absolute doofus that gets everything wrong and then gets killed.
Are you kidding me?
It's well documented by Shyamalan himself that he had a big falling out with Disney over this film. They had some pretty significant concerns about the script and gave him some notes, and he decided he didn't like their notes and took the project over to the WB and didn't listen to anyone because he's M. Night Shyamalan. He can do it all by himself.
That is why you fail.
Well, the majority of critics and audiences agreed with Disney. The movie had some problems. So for me, while there is a certain slickness here to it, projects that are just this self-indulgent and full of themselves just leave me with a terrible taste in my mouth. Also in last place, Avatar: The Last Airbender, a truly baffling film devoid of any of M. Night Shyamalan's distinctions and unique style as a writer or a director.
Not a great plan.
The entire film feels like it's montaging through its story and using voiceover and exposition to fill in all the gaps. Because it is. They decided to adapt an entire season of television into a single movie. Like everything from the season in this one movie, and you can't do that. So the movie has absolutely no narrative flow. There's no spark of life. The acting is dreadful, and there's like a strange amount of just incompetent elements all throughout the entire film. It just is like the polar opposite of these deeply personal, meticulously crafted films that made him famous. This is just a big studio blockbuster trying to adapt an existing property into a big franchise, and for some reason, M. Night decided to do it. It's like the sort of movie that makes you wonder, like did he lose a bet? Was he trying to buy a new house? Why did he sign on to do this particular project? So Lady in the Water is more competently made, but the self-indulgence just makes it so off-putting to me, and this one is just incompetent. Number 12, After Earth. So Will Smith decided he wanted to make his son a big, gigantic movie star by putting him in a sci-fi epic adventure. To do that, he went and got a director known for directing small, personal, slow-paced thrillers.
But why?
This seems like the perfect type of film for a director totally different from M. Night Shyamalan. It's a sci-fi survival adventure film where there's just no fun to be had. It takes itself way too seriously, but the characters aren't interesting enough for us to get invested in their stories and their journeys. Will Smith's character is intentionally designed to be a charisma vacuum. He's emotionally distant and a space superhero. So there's nothing to relate to or connect with. It's the type of character perfectly designed for an actor who's the total opposite of Will Smith, who is potentially the most charismatic actor of the last 30 years. The slow M. Night Shyamalan pacing doesn't really serve the story or the genre. With a film like this, you need to have this sense of urgency and danger, but it's just kind of plodding along at this slow pace, so you never really feel the tension of everything going on. Likewise, the whole movie's set on Earth, and that's kind of the big hook, that Earth is this dangerous place 1,000 years in the future, but it feels like a total waste of that concept because they're just in generic forest. You're not seeing what Earth is like 1,000 years in the future, it's just generic forest. But because it's Earth, it can't be that exotic and interesting, so it's just jungle survival with a couple of interesting little aliens thrown into the mix. So a movie that as a whole is a waste of both Will Smith and M. Night Shyamalan, the two things that should be its two biggest assets, and they have nothing to bring to this particular project. This movie absolutely does not slap. That joke always feels inappropriate, but also always really funny. Next up, Wide Awake, M. Night Shyamalan's first studio film, very much an oddity in his filmography because it's not a thriller. It's a cutesy 90s comedy about a kid dealing with the death of his grandfather and slowly losing faith in God. Hilarious stuff. The movie frequently uses the kid's childish understanding of complex issues for laughs, but given that the issues are death and God, it just makes for a very odd pairing, and the pieces just don't fit together. And all of this really is done with this cutesy family 90s vibe, in particular with the music, but it's not funny, and not just because Rosie O'Donnell is in it. It's all professionally done. It doesn't have some of the incompetence of the films lower on this list, but I just don't know who the movie is for because it is about this fifth grader having an existential crisis of faith while being this very lighthearted family tone, which they just don't go together, and so the movie as a whole doesn't work. Kicking off our top 10, The Happening. This one is campy fun for me, and I'm not really sure if M. Night Shyamalan intended for it to be that, but it is. And every time I do these M. Night Shyamalan rewatchings, this is one that I don't think is good, but I always look forward to getting to rewatch it. And some of that is just how peculiar it is. It plays everything dead serious, but also you have scenes where Mark Wahlberg is apologizing to plants only to realize they're plastic plants, and then he keeps talking.
Just going to talk in a very positive manner, giving off good vibes. Plastic, talking to a plastic plant.
I mean, elements of it worked well enough for me. It always keeps me invested and intrigued throughout. And at the same time, it's just jam-packed with very goofy ideas. Certain sequences are not executed particularly well, and they're done like so in your face and blunt that it's hard not to laugh at some of the shocking images in the film. Like there's this sequence where a guy gets killed at a zoo, and it plays out like a Monty Python skit. Likewise, Mark Wahlberg is going full Wahlberg with all the Wahlbergisms and the way he enunciates things and says things.
What? No.
So I can't say this one is good by any stretch of the imagination, but it is goofy fun for me. Number 9, Old. This movie plays a whole lot better as like a body horror demo reel than as a movie. It feels a little bit like M. Night decided to brainstorm a bunch of ideas for medical issues that would come up if people were aging really quickly, and then cobbled together a plot and twist.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
So when you're going through the movie, there are a bunch of really creative ideas on this island of what would happen if you could age really quickly, and in isolation, They're interesting, they're unique, they're different from one another, and there's a series of these images and sequences that play out and it's like, oh, that's kind of cool. Oh, that's kind of interesting. Oh, that's nasty and horrifying. And then you get to the big twist. The whole movie, you're like intrigued by what's going on, wanting some explanation, something that'll give meaning and purpose to everything that just took place. We get our big twist, and does it work?
Not this time. Not this time. Not a chance. Not this time. Not this time. Not this time.
Like so many M. Night Shyamalan films, he gives us our twist, and you're like, oh, that's all this was about? That's all you had for me? Really? That's what we're doing here? Feels like instead of resolving the plot that was set up, he gives us this whole other thing of how people are exploiting the island rather than giving meaning and explanation to everything taking place. And so it just rings so hollow in the final act. And rewatching it, it was more fun. The ride was more fun than I remember it being. But that final twist and reveal just always disappoints. Then we have The Village. This movie disappointed me so much, I didn't watch a new M. Night Shyamalan film for over 10 years. And I mean that literally. After The Village, I didn't watch any of his new films until Split came out, and I'd started this YouTube channel. Now, it's a professionally made film. There's a bunch of gorgeous shots. In particular, there's some fantastic use of color, and it doesn't have the overt incompetence of a bunch of the movies at the bottom of this list. But it's also a film that feels like it exists entirely for the twist. In which case, there's no deeper exploration of themes or character that was at least intriguing to me. It's just like this 50 minutes of setup leading to a trip through the woods, and the twist was not worth the trip at all.
I'm very disappointed.
Not to spoil this ranking, but the movies at the top of this list, the 3 movies that came before this film, managed to tie together plot, character development, and the twist all at the same time. So the twist itself was the crescendo of everything that had happened in the film up to that point in time, and it reframed everything that you understood about what had happened before in a way that just ended the films on such a satisfying note, that pulled it all together and gave meaning to it all. And that's simply not the case here. It just feels like he started with the twist in mind and then just kind of developed his story backward, but without all of the deeper themes, without the interesting characters, without it feeling like it really pulls everything together. And it's not an embarrassment. It's not poorly made, but it's just a very shallow idea. Number 7, Glass. Now, this is an interesting film because it's a direct sequel to 2 very different films, and it has 3 lead characters. So there's kind of a whole lot to process here, and some of it I absolutely love. I love that we're getting more time with David Dunn, seeing what he's been up to, and kind of, without needing to show a whole lot, with only saying a handful of things, gives you this big kind of rich backstory of what's happened between the 2 films. Love getting to see more of James McAvoy in this performance that just gets to let him shine as an actor and show just how powerful he is as a performer and his ability to transform believably between these different personalities. And just in general, there are some interesting ideas presented in the film as to what's been going on in this world, and put some ideas out there that make you reinterpret what you saw before and kind of puts in a new perspective. Fortunately, it's a movie that really doesn't stick the landing.
Oh no.
The movie itself promised this final showdown between David Dunn and the Beast that I don't think the film's budget would allow. Now, M. Night Shyamalan, to his credit, has been self-financing his movies for about the last 10 years. I actually really respect the fact that he's doing that. It gives him a certain amount of creative freedom, and it means that his movies have a distinct flavor to them. But if it meant that he had to compromise on this film and not deliver on the promise of the setup, I don't think that that's a win. And it feels like he decided to go very subversive and deliver something unexpected rather than what you thought you were going to get. And I don't think that that was the right direction to go, in particular because of what it meant that they had to do with the David Dunn character. I felt was totally unforgivable.
Oh, well, that was disgusting. Worst ending ever.
I mean, I appreciate the fact that M. Night Shyamalan doesn't play it safe. He doesn't go the obvious path. He gave us a victory that was an unexpected victory. But it's also one where you look at it and you go, I just don't think that this was as satisfying as playing it safe and going obvious and just delivering this big slam bang finale. I think that would have made for a much more fun film. And you subverted my expectations by delivering something I really didn't want that wasn't nearly as satisfying. Next up, Knock at the Cabin. And I feel like new M. Night Shyamalan films are always difficult to rank after just a first viewing because they're always kind of swing for the fences in their own way. They're always interesting and different, and they take a while to process, so I don't really know if this one will drop, rise, what will happen with this film on rewatch, and after talking with all of you wonderful people and getting your perspectives on the film. But for me, my takeaway as I left the theater was that was a distinctly mid-tier M. Night Shyamalan film. It doesn't have the overt flaws of the movies that are at the bottom of the list. It didn't do anything that made me mad, but it also doesn't really even attempt to do the stuff that pushes the movies into the top three. It feels in certain ways almost like the least ambitious, certainly in the third acts of his films, where it just kind of plays out. So it doesn't swing and miss, but it also doesn't swing for the fences. It just kind of like lets its story play out. And the inherent nature of this movie, it's a what would you do scenario. The right out of the gate proposes it very directly with Dave Bautista showing up and saying to the family,
Your family must choose to willingly sacrifice one of the three of you to prevent the apocalypse.
And from there, the characters in the film, as well as the audience, are wondering, is this true? And what would you do? What would it take for you to believe? And it plays that out. And because it's so intense and so personal, the stakes are so high, it inherently kind of sucks you in and engages you with what's happening. The performances are really good here. We see like Dave Bautista is actually really going for it as an actor. He's not just doing the Rock that's trying to be big movie star guy. He's not doing the John Cena path of being the funny guy. He's really trying to be an actor, and he's doing it. He's doing lots of different roles and growing. So I love to see that in here. But I felt the movie's a little bit one note, kind of, it just stays on that one point of, is it true? Is it not? The tension, the stakes, the intense performances. And when you get to the end, I don't feel like the movie necessarily needed like a big twist, but it needed something to kind of elevate the finale, to give more meaning to things, to answer more questions. And instead it just kind of plays out of we get answers to the questions being asked, but without anything that feels like it builds to a crescendo. As I mentioned before, kind of the great M. Night films find a way in the final moments to pull together character development, story with a twist, turn, reveal. And I feel like this one just doesn't have that crescendo. It's just kind of ends. And it's kind of anticlimactic, in particular, given how intense things are. It feels like we're building towards something, and then it doesn't really. So a movie that doesn't make the big mistakes of the movies at the bottom of the list, but also doesn't do anything or try to do anything to elevate it higher up on the list. So it's an interesting scenario. It's an interesting what would you do? Some great performances right there in the middle. Kicking off our top 5, The Visit. After a decade of doing vanity projects for himself and vanity projects for Will Smith, this was kind of like his return to simple storytelling and of sorts the genre that made him famous, but a more simple, streamlined version of it. And for that reason, in a lot of ways, this was kind of his comeback film. This is when he decided to start self-funding his films and kind of developed a distinct style that's kind of been true of all the movies he's done in the last decade. And if there was an M. Night film that I would call underrated, it's this one. And if there's one that I think people should probably talk about more and give a little bit more credit to, it's this one. It has a simple setup. It had that you can easily describe. A pair of kids go on vacation to their grandparents and things get weird. Has a twist that makes sense, that kind of pulls things together. There's not a lot of moving parts. It's a found footage film, but it's executed properly. It has the appropriate thrills. It's got some nice jump scares. And one of the things that elevates this movie is that it has just the right amount of humor. It's about these kids shooting this home video, and there's enough kind of weirdness going on with the grandparents that there's actually some solid laughs in here that don't undermine the film as a whole. So it's certainly not an M. Night classic that's kind of in that top 3 where he was just on like this incredible little ride in the early zeros, late 90s. But it's a solid, like mid-level thriller. And of those movies, it's one of his best. Number 4, Split. This is a good thriller elevated by a fantastic performance and a great final reveal. Kevin Wendell Crumb is one of these roles designed to allow a great actor to just tee off and show us just how good he is. Hedwig is funny.
What? Now it's closed. Now it's open.
Dennis is appropriately creepy. Patricia is unsettling. And he's able to like pull off the physicality of the beast. And so like this is a movie designed to just let you see how good of an actor James McAvoy is and his ability to just transition from one personality to the other seamlessly and be believable, creepy, exciting, funny in all of them.
He's not allowed to touch you.
And then our other lead here is Casey, and M. Night Shyamalan was able to cast a then up-and-coming Anya Taylor-Joy in that role. And she's written to be competent enough to be interesting without feeling like she's too prepared for the scenario that she's in. You know, from there, the plot itself, it's fine. It's fairly straightforward. It gives us some thrills. It can be creepy. You get excitement in the third act. Not all the pieces work great. The psychiatrist lady, I don't think was particularly good. The other girls that are taken captive just kind of feel like kind of stock characters thrown in there. And at the same time, it's a movie that's final reveal is so powerful that I remember just leaving the theater absolutely floored that they were able to pull this off. Being in the theater and the music started playing from Unbreakable, and I was like, wait a minute, is this about to go down? Like, wait, what is happening right now? And you got that reveal, and I was just, they're doing this. Wow. I still can't believe that the studio allowed them to keep that a secret. So a movie whose story is good enough, but the movie is absolutely elevated by James McAvoy and that final reveal. Real quick before I give you my top 3, remember to join me down below in the comment section. Share your ranking of the M. Night Shyamalan films. My list is not the right list. It's just my list, and I would love to see yours. Also, I've done a bunch of these director rankings. I've done Tarantino, Fincher, and so many more. You can check that out somewhere around here when this video is over with. Also, remember, I am doing a bunch of live events over the next few months. Fan Expo Portland, Fan Expo Cleveland, MegaCon in Orlando. If you're in any of those areas, I'd love to meet you. Third, The Sixth Sense. This is the movie that put M. Night Shyamalan on the map as a top talent to be watched, and deservedly so. It is just such a wonderfully crafted film where, on the one hand, it's a great story about regret with this man that feels like he failed one of his past patients and is desperately trying to help this new patient to kind of bring his life back together. It's deliberately paced. It's intricately crafted in each and every detail. It's the kind of movie where when you watch the special features, he just describes how every sequence has all these little details that you miss on first viewing. And when you watch it a second time, in light of all the twists, turns, and reveals, you see everything from this new light because he thought through everything. And it works as a character study in a thriller without the twist. You can just watch it and enjoy it as this story about this man trying to redeem himself by helping this child. It's compelling by itself. But then when you throw in the twist, it causes you to reinterpret everything that you saw before and elevates all of it. It works at face value, but it adds all these new layers of complexity to everything that's transpired and only makes it better. And that's when you have a great twist, that the movie works without it, but it's so much better with it. And so in the case of this movie, it is one of the best final twist reveals in cinematic history. Our runner-up, Signs. In a lot of ways, this is probably his most accessible film, as it's a family drama that has thrills, as well as a good bit of humor sprinkled throughout the entire film. At its core, it's an alien invasion movie about people. And it's looking at how different people are responding to this fantastic thing that's taking place. And so you see each of the reactions to the family members, but you also go to town and there's people that think it's a conspiracy that's all about selling soda pop through ads on the news. And so you're just seeing all the different ways people respond to this over-the-top thing taking place. And at its core, it's really about this family that's falling apart because of a tragedy that's taken place. And you have this former father at the local church, who's pastor at the local church, who's lost his faith because he lost his wife. And you're seeing kind of this, how the family's responding to that through the context of this fantastical alien invasion that's taking place. And so there's so many different levels to each and every scene. As an M. Night Shyamalan film, it's one of his funniest. There's all those little moments sprinkled throughout the film that add a little bit of levity to break the tension. But as an alien invasion film, it also does a really nice job of ratcheting up the tension because it's so character-based and so much of it feels relatable, of like people just sitting around watching the news for every last detail. That's what people really do when things like this are taking place. So you feel it, and it leads to one of the best jump scares in cinematic history at the point in time where they're just watching party footage where the alien is finally revealed. And it's just so well done because it feels like what would really happen. And even though you're only watching video footage, it's a great jump scare. Now, I know this movie has its critics and people that don't like the water twist.
Well, agree to disagree.
I don't know. Rewatching it, I only think the film got better. And it just does such a great job of pulling together the plot line about the alien invasion with all of these kind of themes about regret and loss of faith and these parallels of people learning to react and believe in that this alien invasion is real, with this man trying to regain his faith and pulling it all together in the final act with the music, which is just phenomenal. Everything that happens, it just works for me. And it leads to maybe the best emotional crescendo of any of his films. And so I get it. If you can't buy into what he does in the third act with the water, I get why this one would kind of fizzle out for you in the third act. it absolutely does not fizzle out for me. I love what it does for in the third act. And if anything, it works better for me now as a parent, as someone that's gone through more life. It works better for me now than it did 20 years ago. And I loved the movie when it first came out. But in first place is Unbreakable, M. Night Shyamalan's take on the superhero genre that was way ahead of its time. A movie that was well received when it came out and did good when it first came out, but it feels like a movie that probably would have done even better if it had come out 10 years later. And it's a movie that's more interested than in the characters than it is in the action. It's more concerned with exploring identity and purpose than it is in spectacle. And because of that, it's able to tell this story with really deep emotions in big moments where your emotions swell up as you have these revelations and as characters realize things about themselves. It's a movie that its score is the perfect mix of what's going on with the character, where he's a very sad character, so it can be melancholy, but it's also very moving at times, as it's a story of him discovering who he is and becoming this hero, so it can be sad and heroic at the exact same time. It's also a movie with some fantastic performances. And when it comes to like Bruce Willis and Samuel L. Jackson, they're both guys that can be the snarky leading man with all the charisma that relies on them being naturally charismatic as leading men. And here, neither one of them can lean into their leading man charisma. They have to act, and you get to see just how nuanced and detailed and emotional they can really be without doing the big flashy stuff.
Now that you know who you are, I know who I am. I'm not a mistake.
I've said it many, many, many times before on my channel, but I'm always drawn to stories of becoming, stories about discovering identity and purpose and unleashing your potential. And that's what this movie is all about. And I absolutely love the final scene of this movie and the final twist reveal, and what it does, it causes you to reinterpret everything that you've seen up to that point in time, while being the natural culmination of it and only building on everything that's come before. Now, some people think it's anticlimactic and they want to see the stuff that's kind of shown in text. I just feel the exact opposite. Like, it is the perfect crescendo for everything, because it's a movie that's not about the action. It's about the characters. It's about the relationship. It's about purpose and knowing who you are. And it's a final scene that communicates that so well. The balance of good and evil and understanding who you are, and what they do with Samuel L. Jackson's character in that moment and how emotional he is while making this great friend. It's just so potent. It's so powerful. It's so emotional. Like, even talking about it right now, and I've talked about it many times before. I've been watching this movie for over 20 years now. Just thinking about it kind of swells my emotions a little bit, because it's so good on so many levels of what it's communicating about people, friendships, relationships, purpose.
It was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
Oh, I just love what it's able to do. I loved this movie when I saw it opening weekend. I still love it to this day. It's one of my absolute favorite superhero movies of all time. So it comes in at number 1. If you enjoyed this video, remember I've done a bunch of these director rankings. You can check out more of them in that playlist right over there. I will be doing a bunch of live events in the next couple of months. We'll be at Fan Expo Portland, Fan Expo Cleveland, and MegaCon in Orlando. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.